there's so many different types of bands out there. What's the deal with that, and what are they? So I'm going to go through the main types right now. The first type of band that you're looking at is, and I'm going to put these in the order of how I would recommend buying them for the majority of people. With the first one I'm going to mention be the one that I think is the most important for most people to buy, and then we will go on to the least important at the end. And keep in mind, there's a huge variety of different types of bands, so I'm not going to go through every single product that you can find out there, but these are the basics, the major ones. So the first one that we're looking at is, these ones are often called either pull-up assist bands or heavy bands. Sometimes I've seen them called monster bands. These bands, you'll know them when you see them in the fact that they're pretty big, they're pretty long, and they're pretty thick. If you and they loop around, they make a full loop. So if you were to hold these out, they're probably about, I would say, about 2 to 3 feet long. They come in a large variety of resistances. You can use them for assistance on pull-ups. You can use them for stuff like accommodating resistance on your barbell if you're doing exercises like that. You can use them for squats over your shoulders, just a variety of different reasons, a variety of different exercises. And the reason why I would recommend these bands as the most important type of band to get for most people is one reason and one reason only: versatility. When you're looking for home workout equipment or something you're going to carry in your gym bag that is cheap and portable, you want something that's going to give you the best bang for your buck. And the reason being is you can use these thick pull-up assist bands or monster band or whatever you want to call them, these larger bands, for a ton of different things, and they can also go pretty high in resistance. The second thing is you can stack these bands on top of each other. Like you can stack 2, 3, 4, even 5 of these bands on top of each other to add extra resistance, so you get a lot of customizability with the different types of exercises you can do and the different type of bands setups that you can do with these bands. So that's why I would recommend these as the first type of band you can get. They're thick, they're strong, they're durable, and they're really not that expensive either. Okay, moving on to the second type of band. The second type of band we're looking at is like the ones that you've probably seen these advertised on Amazon. I've seen these advertised all over the place now online when everybody's doing home workouts. And this type of band has a grip handle, and it has kind of like a carabiner hook on it. And there's a variety of different bands you get basically a kit of usually like 5 or 6 bands that you can hook onto the handles using that carabiner. And these things are useful because you can use them for stuff like curls, presses, rows, things like that. But the main problem with them, and why I would not recommend them over the previous bands that I just talked about, is that they generally do not go super high in terms of the amount of resistance that you can put on them. They're fine if you're fairly new to resistance training, or if you're doing light exercises like stuff like side raises, front raises, curls, things of that nature. But for heavier stuff, like if you're trying to do a bench press or if you're trying to do squats with these bands, for most people they're probably not going to cut it. The good thing is these bands are they're very loadable, and they're easy to hook a bunch of these bands up using the carabiners onto the handles or whatever other attachments usually come with the kits. It usually comes with like an ankle thing that you can hook onto your ankle. They might come with like a strap that can hook up to your doorway. They might come with like I've seen them come with attachments that you can use even on your abdomen or whatever, your torso. You can hook them on your torso if you want to do like hip thrust or something. But the great thing about them is that they are very easy to hook up and set up. They're probably the easiest of all the bands to hook up and set up. And because of that, I've seen a lot of people poo-poo these bands and say that they're not very useful because for most, if you're a big, strong, strapping man, like you don't need these light resistance bands. They're too light and they're just not going to get anything for you. But I don't think that's true. I think if you buy one of these kits and you stack all of the bands on them, even if you're a really strong guy, you can still get something out of them for stuff like curls or lighter exercises. And I keep a set in my repertoire. I originally got them because I did home training. I went to people's houses and I would train people one-on-one, and I needed some portable bands that could be used in a variety of circumstances for people of a variety of different skill levels. And we usually got a pretty good workout out of this simple set of 5 bands. So that would be my second recommendation. The next type of band we're looking at is what I usually seen referred to as a mini band or like a looping band or like a hip circle. So this type of band, usually sometimes they can come in something called, I've seen often called a glute loop, where they have really high resistance, and people use them for assistance on squats or hip thrusts, and it really takes a lot of effort to drive those out. Those ones are usually made out of fabric. Or the other variety is there's ones that have they're kind of thinner, but they're still short and they still loop. You usually put them around your knees for stuff like squats, hip thrusts, side steps, monster walks, or accommodating resistance during squats, deadlifts, whatever. Now, the reason why I would recommend these bands far less than the previous two is because they're not very versatile. You might notice the type of things I just said you can do with them. You can't really do a lot. You can basically wrap them around your knees and use them as accommodating resistance for exercises that involve knee and hip flexion, like, again, squats, deadlifts, side steps, hip thrusts, stuff like that. But other than that, they don't have a tremendously high degree of usability. I'm kind of struggling to think of any other uses for them than what I just said. Again, not saying that they're bad, and I have used these with clients before if I'm training someone in a gym that has them, or if the client has these bands just laying around and I'm making them a home workout. I would throw these bands in there because any amount of variation in your training program is usually a good thing as long as it's structured properly. But yeah, I just don't find these bands as useful or as versatile as the previous two. And then the third type of band, that's the final type that I'm going to talk about, is you have your what I usually see referred to as a Pilates band or a light band. And what these are is these bands are usually, they're very thin and rubbery, and they're usually they're not that long, but they're usually pretty wide, but not thick at all. I'd say they're usually probably about like 4 inches wide. They have a lot of stretch, but they're not very durable, and they don't loop like the other bands. They go in a straight line, basically. And these bands are usually useful for stuff like if you want to use them for like a stretch or like a pull apart or like Pilates, right? But the main issue with these bands is that they are just not very strong, and they're just not very usable in a variety of environments or variety. They don't have a lot of versatility. Like, you can't take these bands and hook them onto a barbell. I mean, you could if you tie them in a knot, but again, that's going to compromise the integrity of the band. And these bands are not super strong anyway. They don't have a lot of integrity. So I really wouldn't recommend. The good thing about these bands is that they're usually super cheap. They're usually the cheapest out of all of these. And I remember when I started out, I bought a set of these bands, and I was like, yeah, we can use them for whatever. But they kind of broke really quickly. And even the better quality ones, they're still not super strong. So Pilates bands, unless you're really interested in getting into something like that, I would generally not recommend them. And I would recommend all three of the other types in front of them. But if you just want to increase versatility, and because of the fact that bands are not super expensive, you could always get all four types. I'm just here to give you what I think is the best bang for your buck. So again, in order of importance and in order of usefulness, I would put the bands at pull-up assist bands at the number one. The resistance band kits that have like the carabiner and you can hook multiples of them together at second. Then I would put like a glute loop or a mini band third, and then finally I would put a Pilates band as probably the least useful type.